I feel like money is one of those things that coaches and people interested in personal transformation listen to this podcast, and one of the big things that I consistently hear all those categories of people to say is their struggle with money or relationship with money.
Mhm.
What have you found?
Yeah, so it's first identifying like what are those money blocks that are coming up for you. And so for me, when I first started off as a coach, I'd never built a business, didn't know how to sell. I found myself getting on all these sales calls and just like people would tell me they wanted to work with me, but then the next breath they would say, "Well, I don't have the money." And that would be the end of the conversation. I didn't know how to dig deeper, and I wasn't taught that it was okay to even talk about money or to broach the subject with someone who was essentially a stranger. And so I just had a lot of fear around having that conversation. And so I started to work with my own coach and identify what my money blocks really were and what my money programming was. And so I really think that's the first place for people to start. A lot of people,
Can we before you go into that, can
yeah.
you explain what is a money block?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that they have a money block and they don't know that they have money stories. And it's essentially what you were taught to believe about money by your parents, by society, just what you grew up with, maybe different memories that you have when it comes to money. And all of that is basically programming, like a computer programming, that is your way of dealing with money, your relationship with money, how you think about it, how you interact with money. And for most people, there is an element of scarcity around it's hard to make money. It's not possible for me. Maybe you grew up with a family that didn't have a lot of money. And so you don't see yourself as being able to be wealthy. I know, I grew up with entrepreneurs all around me. And so I had this belief that I could make a lot of money. And when I started my business, I wanted to make 6 figures and then I wanted to make 7 figures and all the things. But my husband didn't grow up with an entrepreneurial family at all. And so him getting a raise and making 40 grand a year was like a massive thing. And even, a few years ago, he was like, you know what? I never thought that I would be making this amount of money. It just wasn't even on my radar. And so he had to do a lot of work to even generate the belief that he could do it. And so that's where most people are when they start a business. And you have to tune into like, okay, do I avoid talking to my clients about money? Do I avoid raising my prices? Am I worried about selling? Do I have this belief that if I'm helping people, I shouldn't be paid well?
Hmm.
All these things. So really just observing, just like you were writing down your desires, write down the stuff that comes up for you on a regular basis around money and start making a list of all the harmful thoughts that
Hmm.
are holding you back from creating the reality you want.
And what does one do with those thoughts
Yeah.
once they've written it
So,
down?
yeah, once we identify them, then we work on shifting them. And for most people, like we need to take it step at a time. So for me, when I realized I had this fear around talking about money, I started to just challenge myself on these sales calls to just ask people, let's look at your bank account, or can I help you find the money? You just told me you want to work with me. Let's look at how we can generate the money. And of
That's
course,
a really difficult question to ask. I must acknowledge you to be able to ask that. So
thank
yeah,
you.
that's great. Yeah, go on, keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I had this period of 54 people saying no to me on sales calls. And I was like on a call with my coach. I was like, this is not working. And then I realized I was basically just saying like, okay, no problem. Thanks for your time. Bye. And that was the end of the call. And so I realized it was actually my duty to have a conversation with them about money because they were telling me they wanted to change their life. And if I was ending the conversation then, I wasn't actually helping them. They had more than enough people in their life, who would adhere to the belief that it wasn't possible for them and would, continue to say, oh, just play it safe. You don't need to do that. Like, just enjoy your life. And so I wanted to be the person that would challenge them in that and support them in getting the results they wanted. So yeah, one of the first questions I started with was, how can we find the money? Let's make a plan. And I actually had this little PDF of 20 ways that they could find the money. And so we would go through that live on the call and just say, do you have a family member where you could borrow the money? Do you have something you could sell? Do you have a credit card? Like all the things. And most of the time, a lot of the time people actually had the money. Maybe it was savings or 401k or whatever, and they weren't even allowing themselves to go there and thinking about using it. And that is programming. If we think we need to keep money in a savings account for a rainy day versus investing in a business, like that is programming, and that's going to hold you back every day of the week, right? And so having a different perspective on money was the thing that helped me support other people in doing the same. But I had to work on myself first. So getting over the fear of even talking about money. And when I started to see, okay, this is just a conversation, just like any other conversation. It doesn't need to have all this weight or this negative negative connotation around it. I could just talk to them about their finances. That started to work, and people started to sign up with me, and things started to shift. Then even one of my coaches talked to me about confidence with money. So a lot of people think when they work with me, I'm going to tell them to raise their prices. And I do ultimately, but I'd rather you feel confident about what you're selling first, because there needs to be an energetic match. So at the time when I was going through all of these trainings, my coach told me to split my prices in half. And I was only selling a 90-day package. It was $3,000, and she wanted me to sell it for $1,500. And I was like, that's crazy. That's so cheap. But I didn't have the confidence yet to sell the $3,000 package. So when I was getting on these calls with people, I was saying the price, and energetically they were feeling that I wasn't confident in it. So when I lowered it, it shifted everything. And I was like, this is the best thing since sliced bread. I didn't have needy energy. I was just putting it out there, take it or leave it. And so it was a different sort of vibe. Ended up selling 10 of those. And that was one of my first big months. And I was able to leave my 9-to-5 job. And so anyway, these are just my personal examples of some of the things that I had to start to transform. So I think you just pick a couple, and then you start to look at, okay, how can I start to shift that? Is it working with a mentor on transforming this? Or is it raising my price a little bit? Or is it lowering my price? Is it just asking my clients, let's have a financial conversation. Let's talk about your bank account. Let's see how you can make the money, right? Because there's always something we can shift.